I'm tired every day.
Hard to really get out of bed.
He twitches and carries on all night.
Sleep is a very dynamic and complex process.
Why do we need to sleep? Do we need to sleep?
We are confronted by a 24-hour world.
I'm feeling a little anxious and wired up.
Our society is horribly sleep deprived.
Your reaction time is slower.
The next thing I knew, I'd gone off the road.
Our sleep is getting squashed.
So the dreaming process is a process of memory integration.
Dreams are symbolic.
Your help is as close as your pillow.
Each and every night, most of us undergo a profound change. We leave the waking world and we go to sleep. Hello, I'm Dr. Sanjay Gupta. Over the next hour, we're going to look at what's keeping us up and how to get a better night's sleep. We'll also look at the dangers of fatigue. We begin in the middle of the night and one woman's failed attempt to try and sleep. It's 4 a.m. Jolie Feinberg wakes up and can't get back to sleep.
I'm very tired. I woke up.
We've all been there, insomnia. But for some, like Jolie, it happens all the time. She's busy enough during the day to be tired, so why can't she sleep?
I'll see you tomorrow. Okay. Daddy, when you're ready to sit down.
She and her husband Stan, both in their mid-40s, are raising two energetic toddlers. Esther is 4, and costume-loving Sophia is 3. Jolie cooks, cleans, and shops.
Let's get some good hot cereal. How about...
Because we don't like bad ones.
No, we don't like bad ones, that's for sure.
Has clothes laid out a week in advance and dinner on the table every night by 5:30.
Would you call it stressful?
Yeah, I mean, it's very busy. There's a lot going on.
Jolie also works at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, where she heads up a program that fits implants on children with severe hearing impairments.
Ball, jump ball.
Now we can go listen and raise your hand, and when you listen, I'm gonna do that. So I leave the office, and sometimes I leave things undone. And I will often wake up in the middle of the night and realize, oh, I didn't do that. Oh my gosh, I forgot to call them back. Oh no.
Jolie is usually in bed by 10:30 and asleep around 11. But she doesn't stay asleep, and that's the problem. We asked Jolie to videotape those moments when she wakes up and can't get back to sleep.
It's Sunday night, and it's about 1:30. I've actually been up for about an hour or so. I didn't realize so much time had gone by. But I'm feeling a little anxious and wired up. It's still Sunday night. It's now about 4 a.m. I think I was back here at about 1:30. I've just been dozing on and off for about the last 3 hours.
Jolie is among an estimated 50 to 70 million Americans who have trouble sleeping. Dr. Mark Rosekind, a former NASA scientist and sleep expert, consults the U.S. Olympic Training Center about sleep.
On average, most adults need about 8 hours, and the estimates are that most of us are getting probably an hour and a half less than we need.
Researchers still don't know precisely why we need sleep, but they do know lack of sleep has serious consequences, both physical and mental.
We are talking about your reaction time, decision-making, coordination, memory, learning. Everything we do is going to be degraded or even impaired.
So what is sleep? Dr. William Dement at Stanford University, considered the father of sleep medicine, says sleep is a state when the mind loses consciousness.
It's just a perceptual shutdown. And even if your eyelids are taped open, at the moment of sleep, you become blind.
Most people think your head hits a pillow and it's all quiet. It's not at all. Sleep is a very dynamic and complex process that goes on every single night.
Every 90 minutes, we cycle through 5 different stages. One stage, called REM, or rapid eye movement sleep, is when we do most of our dreaming, and our bodies are actually paralyzed. That's why we don't act out our dreams. This man does. He has a sleep disorder called REM behavior disorder. He's not paralyzed during REM and can harm himself and others acting out his dreams. I'll have more on this and other disorders a little later. Other stages of sleep are non-REM, including deep sleep. The body is not paralyzed, but movement is minimal.
Non-REM is critical, especially the deep sleep, because it's most responsible for memory consolidation as well as our physical restoration during the night.
So if you're physically active, deep, non-REM sleep is crucial for performing at your peak.
But REM sleep is critical too, because that's the time when most of the memory and learning is being consolidated, and it's when we dream, which is a very important part of our emotional life.
Here's one way to tell if you're sleep deprived. 2 or 3 hours after you wake up, sit in a comfortable chair in a dark room for 10 minutes. Just sit, no distractions. If you fall asleep, it's a sure sign you need more sleep.
Sometimes when I first wake up in the morning, it's hard to really get out of bed to think like, ugh.
Jolie is feeling those signs.
I'm tired a lot. I definitely am, and I think it's more that I can't always keep track of things. My memory is probably not as good as it should be.
This room right here.
To help her, we arranged for Jolie to undergo a sleep assessment with psychologist Russell Rosenberg.
Have you ever talked to your family physician?
He has her wear a special watch called an actigraph to record her movements during sleep.
And this shows where you had periods of wakefulness, where you were awake in the middle of the night.
It will help detect if she has a sleep disorder, like restless leg syndrome, a condition that affects as many as 12 million Americans, keeping them awake and twitching with shooting pains up and down their legs and arms. Today, there are medications to help. Sleep apnea affects an estimated 18 million Americans. Snoring is a sign, but the real danger is when snoring and breathing stop for long periods. With sleep apnea, the airway collapses during sleep, cutting off air supply. Being overweight increases your risk.
There's an epidemic of obesity, and there's an epidemic of sleep apnea.
Dr. Mayer Krieger, a noted author on the subject, says sleep apnea brings more people to his clinic than anything else. Today, there are devices called CPAP machines that open airways and pump in oxygen.
And she's sleeping literally there like a baby.
Increasingly, Americans are turning to prescription drugs to help them sleep. More than 8 million people are taking prescription sleeping pills. And it's not just adults taking sleep meds. Prescriptions for children aged 10 to 19 are up 85% since 2000. Annual sales of sleep drugs now top $2 billion in the United States. Even so, drugs are not the most common sleep aid.
More people in the U.S. use alcohol to help them sleep than use sleeping pills. And alcohol is a lousy sleep aid. You may initially doze off quicker after alcohol, but 3 or 4 hours later, you're awake, you're wired, and you may not be able to fall asleep again.
Few things can disrupt sleep like working the night shift. Being awake at night and asleep during the day throws our internal body clocks, known as our circadian rhythms, out of whack. Sunlight signals our bodies when to be awake. But even deprived of any natural light, we will still feel a surge of fatigue in the middle of the night. And to a lesser extent, in the middle of the afternoon. Our body clocks can only adjust an hour a day to different time zones. That's why we experience jet lag. It's not jet lag, but a racing mind that Jolie says is keeping her up at night.
Since I've had children, I've really set a limit on the amount of overtime I will do. So I leave the office, and sometimes I leave things undone, and sometimes that will wake me up and get me, going, thinking about a list of all the stuff that I didn't get done for the day.
So I have a couple of techniques that might help you with that.
Later in the show, we'll hear what Rosenberg and others recommend to help patients cope with insomnia.
Still ahead, what do your dreams really mean? But first, the life and death dangers of not getting enough sleep. We now return to sleep with Dr. Sanjay Gupta.
We live in a world where day and night no longer matter. We can work, play, eat, pretty much do anything we want around the clock. What we don't do enough of is sleep.
I would say that I average about 6 hours of sleep.
About 4 to 6 hours, maybe.
Probably get 4 or 5 hours. 4 or 5 hours.
I'm tired every day. Every night I'm tired.
As a society, we are chronically sleep deprived, researchers say. Most of us need 7.5 to 8 hours of sleep, but we're only getting an average of about 6.5 during the week, a little more on weekends. This shortfall doesn't go away. In fact, it builds. Researchers call this our sleep debt.
Day after day, living on reduced amounts of sleep, you become more and more impaired, more dependent on caffeine, have more difficulty concentrating, at greater risk for falling asleep, more difficulty remembering, but you think you're doing fine. The facility is set up to control those factors that typically influence sleep-wake behavior.
David Dingus runs a sleep and chronobiology lab at the University of Pennsylvania.
Sensors.
His lab deprives healthy people of sleep to see how they do.
The baby cried and upset her
mother.
George could not believe his son stole a
quarter.
Blue, red, green.
Stay up for 24 hours, like this test subject, and you're likely to perform as well as someone who's had a couple of drinks. Here's something else. Experiments show for the vast majority of people, sleeping 6 hours a night for a week will result in mental lapses and sleepiness, as severe as if you'd stayed up all night long. Long-term, lack of sleep can have serious consequences on our health.
The less you sleep, the more likely you are to die of all causes, or to have a heart attack or a stroke, or to have diabetes, or to have weight gain.
My name is Tom Callaghy. I'm a professor of political science at the University of Pennsylvania.
You don't have to wait years for fatigue to take a tragic toll. It can happen in the blink of an eye.
My wife and I were coming back from a dog agility show in Virginia, and we actually left in the middle of Sunday afternoon, and it was a gray, sort of overcast day. It had been drizzly, that I was getting sleepy. I turned on the radio, opened the window a little bit, I moved around, and I actually had my hand partway across the seat to wake her up. And the next thing I knew, I'd gone off the road and into the trees.
Tom Callaghy's wife, Janie, died in that crash. Callaghy talks about the accident to warn others about the dangers of drowsy driving.
My kids had a mother one day and something out the next. I mean, Kathleen said, my daughter, said that Mom went away for the weekend, just never came home.
In a first-of-its-kind study, the Virginia Tech Transportation Institute wired up 100 cars for a year to capture driver behavior. The cars got into 82 accidents during that time, and researchers say fatigue contributed to 10 of them. Here, we see a driver in the study nodding off for a moment and almost running off the road. According to federal estimates, drowsy driving causes 100,000 crashes a year in the United States, resulting in 1,500 deaths and 71,000 injuries. Dr. Charles Seisler is chief of the Division of Sleep Medicine at the Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston.
Every second in this country, somebody is nodding off or falling asleep at the wheel. And every 2 minutes, that's 30 times an hour, there is a fall asleep crash on our nation's highways associated with people who haven't gotten enough sleep at night.
If you are nodding off, experts agree. Pull over immediately. If possible, find a place to stay. If not, drink a cup of coffee and take a half-hour nap. When you wake up, the caffeine will have taken effect. Still, give yourself another half hour before you start driving again. The latest research shows that grogginess right after you wake up can also be dangerous. Fatigue can have catastrophic results in many areas, not just driving.
Engines beginning throttling down now.
The commission investigating the 1986 Space Shuttle Challenger disaster said overworked and sleep-deprived managers at Kennedy Space Center ignored known risks and allowed the launch to take place.
Challenger, go at throttle up.
When the Exxon Valdez ran aground in 1989, the third mate